Welcome back to Radio Bath. We are with Business Conversations with Unividual Chartered Financial Planner. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you,
Cherie-Anne, Greg.
Been a while.
Yeah,
It's been a while.
You've been blessed with Simon Jones for a few months.
We have been blessed, and his guests.
Yeah.
We learned a lot over the last couple of months, but it's good to have you back again.
Thank you. Yeah,
Got the B team
the
back.
dynamic duo
The B
back
team,
in
that's
town.
all right. We've learned from Bath that B teams are good.
Yeah,
Yes,
true.
very, very true. But that's a bit sensitive at the moment.
That is a bit sensitive. I shouldn't have said that. However, so what's been happening with Unividual?
Oh, we've been so busy.
Yeah, we've just done a huge recruitment run. So we've just taken on, I think it's nearly 10, isn't it, across
Yeah.
both offices? Nearly 10 members of staff. A really good placement students from local universities as well. So we've taken on 6 from various different universities. They'll be with us for just under a year. And then the others are full-time staff, full-time contracts, but often people that have got a bit more experience under the belt. So really nice mix, but a very busy office at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot changing in our industry, and it's quite difficult to operate in our industry. A lot of extra admin and work to do, so we're having to recruit lots of extra people to help facilitate those changes.
So that financial planners can focus on what they're good at instead of filing the paperwork.
Maintaining that service level and feeling like you have the time to get back to people and tick all the boxes from a personable point of view as well. So it's quite challenging. It's a lot of extra cost, but it's something that we feel we've got to invest in. And the added benefit is we're helping young people or inexperienced people get into the industry, which is something we're really passionate about.
That's very good. And we had a young man join us a couple of months ago.
Yes, yeah.
Is it Matt?
And we've got a guy, we're thinking of asking Raj to come in from London, to come in and have a little interview as well. And we might get Andy down too.
Yeah.
A couple of people going through the academy. It's good for them to get experience in this kind of environment.
And for the academy, that's for future financial planners.
Yeah, and also technical. So when we first started it, and this is going back some years, I'm not going to show our ages, but
we already know.
Yeah, we already know, unfortunately.
We already know I'm young.
But it was very much focused on that, getting really high quality financial planners out there in the marketplace. We have shifted that slightly now, simply because of some of the things that Cherie-Anne was saying relative to. The regulator quite understandably will tarnish every firm by the worst brush, because there are a lot of people historically that haven't done the right thing for their customers, been very much looking after their own back pocket, which interestingly is something that we'll be talking about later on today. So we've got a lot of regulation coming in that firms like ours and other quality firms in Bath and Bristol and places like that probably don't need to have, because we're very much vested in our customers, but there's just that additional reporting and proving what you're doing rather than actually just getting on and doing it. So really interesting time for the industry, great time for the business, really, really excited.
Yeah.
Again, it's Cherie-Anne's team that have done the majority of the recruiting, but we've got some really interesting, fun people. So it's really mixed up the dynamic of the office, and it probably needed a bit of that.
We have a strong focus on recruiting diversity as well, so it's just nice to have some people in the company that are different and bring something unique to the table. That's what we're all about.
Yeah.
Unividual, unique and individual. So it's been nice to have some fresh faces and people with different hobbies and different backgrounds. Really enjoyable, and we'll see how they settle in over the next couple of months.
I think they'll be perfectly well settled. And that's really, really interesting to hopefully meet some of them on the show one day.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today, and why is it important?
So we're talking about company year end. Now, we're conscious that lots of companies have different year ends at different points in the year, but we're going to focus on year end being December. So whether that's your financial year or just that we tend to, as business owners, work from January to December because we've got that lovely break over Christmas. And we want to look at how can you plan now for the year end, because even though it feels quite a way off because it's still the summer, it's actually quite close. And if we can put the effort in now to decide what we're going to do, we've still got time to make changes to things like the influx of clients that we're getting, or trying to improve client retention to make a difference to our end figures and how we potentially then may remunerate ourselves as business owners.
You mean we need to
We do.
We do need to pay
We
ourselves.
should
Yeah.
be.
Oh, is that right?
We should be. I know it's a
What?
weird concept for us
Wow,
all
I
in
thought our
this
job
room.
as business owners was to pay other people.
Yeah,
salary.
yeah. I mean, we tend, as business owners, we tend to not practice self-care very well. We're the ones in the aeroplane that when they say put your mask on before your child, we absolutely do not.
And we run to the cockpit, make
Yeah.
sure the pilot's got his mask,
And we
go
take
around every
over the-
stewardess.
Yeah, we take over the plane and do the landing ourselves, don't we? But yeah, we want to talk about that and sort of talk about that kind of concept that we don't really talk about at all. It's a bit of a taboo. That,
It is a different topic this
Yeah.
month, isn't it? And do you
Yeah.
find that without all this stuff that we're going to talk about, that business owners don't have anything left to pay themselves?
You do get that sometimes. I think it's about the mindset, though, definitely. I mean, I had an introductory meeting with someone yesterday, very, very successful business owner, multiple sort of streams of revenue, and done very, very well over the last couple of years, in particular where, that horrible word pivoting, but, it's really changed his business models. And we spoke for probably about an hour and 45 minutes, and we mentioned children, family members, his staff. And then I did say to him at the end, do realise we haven't spoken at all about what you want out of this whole circumstance and this whole process. And he kind of looked at me a bit flabbergasted to say exactly what we've just been saying. What, I can take money out of my business? It was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but, there are definite times when, as smaller business owners, we look at it and, as you both said, we focus on, clients first and foremost, absolutely. They're the bread and butter. Then your employees, then your new staff or staff that have been with you for a long time. And then potentially we look after ourselves, and that's not the wrong way around to look at things. But we just need to be making sure that third and final stage is equally as important.
I think if you don't remunerate yourself properly, you get a certain amount of time down the line and you start to lose motivation and purpose. And that's no good to anyone. It's no good to your staff. It's no good to your company. So it's really important that you value yourself. And the other thing is that your staff look up to you. So if you're not taking enough of a bonus and you're not remunerating yourself, sometimes people make others aware of that. And they're not going to really want to aspire to be a business owner or potentially take over the company one day if what they get with that is no remuneration. So we have to set an example in many different ways. And I'm not saying we are very good at this ourselves. We definitely sit in the camp that we get to the end of the year and we pay everyone a bonus and then we think, can we afford to take one ourselves? I think some of this comes from a place of this is our experience and we want to change that, and therefore there must be plenty of other business owners out there that are probably in the same feeling in the same camp as us.
Well, the first hour I talked about self-love as a good foundation of good leadership, because when your glass is empty, you can't give properly and you're always on lack mode. And from we talked about heart, body, mind, and spirit, having that fulfilled. But let's add the fifth dimension of just pocket, right? I mean, you've got to have your financial needs fulfilled, or else sometimes you're on a lack mode in terms of how you reward people. You might be jealous of what you're rewarding to them, or you might be really stingy with your staff when actually you don't need to be. It's just because you haven't received some cash lately. And that could be quite harmful to your relationship with them.
And I think we've spoken before on this show about the link between sort of financial well-being and overall well-being of individuals and families and things. And we all know there's so much information out there at the moment that if you are stressed, you do not make good decisions. Yes, we live in a world now where there's always a level of stress, but if we are under pressure, and one of those pressures could be financial strain as a business owner, which sometimes happens, and I'm sure a lot of business owners can resonate with that over the last 2.5, 3 years, we potentially are putting ourselves in a position where if we don't look after ourselves and don't care for ourselves financially speaking, we put ourselves in an environment where we are more stressed than we need to be, and therefore we don't make focused decisions on what is best for the business, ourselves, our customers, our employees, all those things that we said are so important. So it's a bit chicken and egg, really, isn't it? You've got to look after yourself, but also have the business in a position whereby you have the affordability to be able to look after yourself over and above all the other plans. So,
and I find also that some of the businesses I've dealt with, they are good enough, but you have this conditioned mind that I always have to expand. I always have to expand. I always go bigger. Bigger means I'm happier. And instead of taking that growth fun and enjoying that for your own maybe family growth fund or vacation fund, you reinvest it back in a business thinking that's going to make you more successful.
Yeah.
When there's a point where actually if you just leave that business to grow for a while instead of reinvesting and buying new assets and getting new staff, your business is fine. And do you really need to expand? Or is it time for you to balance your life somehow?
I think there's a concept as entrepreneurs, we feel like if we're not stepping forward hugely, that we're moving backwards.
Yeah. Loser.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think what makes us entrepreneurial is we're competitive, we want to develop things and we want to grow things. And I think that what you just talked about takes discipline. And I think it's really important that we start off with what the end goal is. And not many people do this when they start up a business or they're working in a business. They don't say like what's the end goal, like when are we going to step away from this company? And because of that, you're constantly growing, when actually if you were going to have your business for another 20 years, that's a long time. You can play, you know, this steady game.
Yes.
And me and my brother always talk about, you know, life's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So actually you've got to make it to the end, and part of remuneration is that motivation element that you've got to get to the end and enjoy it, because if you don't, you won't be a successful leader.
Yeah, exactly. And when is enough is a good question I sometimes ask people when they're, I want to achieve and I want more and more. So, oh, really? So when is enough for you?
Yeah.
Define that spot. And then some people say, never thought of enough.
Yeah.
I just thought of more.
Yeah.
And there's very few businesses and financial services that are, I mean, the average advisor number in our industry is 2.3 or something like that. So it's
And
not
that's
many.
a ratio, sorry, what was it,
2.3 advisors per business. So
Oh,
there's
okay.
not many companies of our size. So you have to get to a point where you think, okay, let's look at the industry and what the makeup is of other businesses that that are operating in our industry. And sometimes you can look around and go, is there a reason why the average is 2.3 advisors per business? Because that's when you start looking at costs and your planning and what you're doing. So that there's not, for us, we've got a niche and we want to stay within this niche. We feel like, you know, 6 to 10 advisors is really right for us. But there does come a point where we've even said we don't want too many financial advisors, because that's when things like your service starts getting impacted.
Becomes overly corporate.
Yes.
Yeah,
overly
and it's
bureaucratic.
controlling compliance and controlling high levels of standard and service, like you said. It becomes so much more difficult. You'd almost need separate people then, another tier of management to feed into the directors, between the directors and the advisors, whereby at the moment directors and board level can sit down and regularly do with each advisor, find out how they're going on, what resources they need, what they need to, you know, go and be able to do the levels of trade that they need to be able to do, but also to keep their doors open for customers and new customers alike. So there's a real balance. But I think one of the things we'll cover off a little bit later is you both talked about mindset, and again it's putting things down as simply as you possibly can do. But you've got to look at the business and go, right, okay, am I working as hard as I am in this business to grow a capital asset? You know, something that is going to have a tangible value at the end, whether that's 5, 10, 15, however many years, that I'm then going to be able to sell, put on the market and sell for a lump sum? Or is it a business that predominantly you're going to be earning money out of throughout that 20-year time frame, and actually at the end of it there might not be quite as much of a capital value? Again, there's a balance. It's not quite as polarised as that. But understanding, because that may change year in, year out. You may have an opportunity in a given year whereby you can do things within the business to increase that overall asset value. But conversely, there will also be options within the business to then increase what you can do from a remuneration point of view. And that doesn't just mean board level or shareholders. That means individuals within the business and the business owners. So
it's kind of like when you buy a house, isn't it? Is this am I going to earn my money back doing rental property, monthly rentals, or am I just going to wait and sit there and in 10 years' time sell it for double its value?
Yeah, and as you're doing a bathroom or you're doing a kitchen, you're constantly looking at the value of your property, or you should be, and whether you're overspending. Because if you had to sell it that year,
Is it
you
worth
need
it?
you need to make back the money that you have made. So I think there's lots of things within your life that you could look at from a business perspective, and yet sometimes with our own businesses we don't put those glasses on in that way. We just get stuck in our lane. Quite a lot of business owners have their day job. So if you're a recruiter as well as a business owner. You're an advisor as well as a business owner, and it's quite difficult if you haven't got people in your company that sit more holistically and ask these questions and say every month, hang on a second, where are we at with our overall strategy?
Exactly. Well, we'll be back with more business conversations with Unividual about that overall strategy.
Made locally in Bath. This is Radio Bath. Radio Bath.
Welcome back to Business Conversations with Unividual Chartered Financial Planners, Cherie-Anne Baxter and Greg Harris in the house.
Yeah. Or should I say bonjour?
Bonjour, monsieur, I'm sure.
Because you've just come back from France.
Yeah,
Wow,
we
how
just
long
came
were you in
back from
France?
6 days, and look what happened.
I feel like you picked the accent up so well.
Well, when we talk about paying ourselves back, or paying ourselves as business owners, we need to talk about cash. Like, do we even have cash to pay our bills? Well, tell us a bit more about how you think we should look at cash.
So, lots of different ways. I think pick a lane and stick in it, really. Whatever works for you as an individual business. But I think the primary is making sure you've got decent cash flow sort of processes in place. So we, as a business, we will look at things on a monthly basis. You know, we get feedback in from all the advisors or any stream of revenue to understand what's coming in and what's going out. That was something that we probably enhanced a lot over COVID, and again, apologies for mentioning COVID, but that's something that we really enhanced over that, and we've taken it forward, haven't we, to really include that as part of our sort of, you know, alert system should anything happen, because, you know, when businesses get to a certain scale, it can actually be quite difficult sometimes to see if there's a hole that needs to be filled or you know, there's a leak somewhere. So you need to be making sure that you're on top of absolutely everything. I think when we're then talking about cash, you know, we were just talking off air about how, you know, having different accounts can really help, you know, separate business accounts that can have earmarked capital in them. So one of the things that most businesses have struggled with over the last sort of 2 or 3 years really is your emergency funding. So what we mean by that is having some liquidity, so some capital that you can use at pretty much a drop of a hat's notice, that if you needed to, you know, plug a funding gap, you can do so. Typically, for people and individuals, we talk about 3 months, but for most businesses, I think, you know, 6 months, if not 12, can be a really good level of sort of security on.
Depends on the size of the business.
It absolutely does.
And wage bills
as well.
Yeah.
Because I used to work with a marble supplier, and they would have to buy a block of Italian mountain and transport it to Asia, where they would keep it for years.
Wow.
Okay, so their cash, you know, they need to have a contingency plan of years, not just months, or because of the nature of what they're selling. Because they'd sell to an apartment building, the project will buy it a year before the building is even built, and then it'll take another 2 years to build the building, and then they'll start using all the marble. So it's really different compared to something that's more fast paced.
Yeah, it's got to be adapted to your business, and I think as business owners we get a feel for it as we go along. I think if something's happening like, you know, the Ukraine war, most business owners would have looked at that and gone, okay, we might get into a situation where we'll get a cost of living crisis. We'll start to maybe keep a little bit of extra surplus cash in case we get less money coming through the door. So I think it's about just getting a feel for it. But what you also don't want is so much cash reserve that you're not then reinvesting back in your business or improving things, or your own life, or you're not rewarding your staff or providing them a cost of living rise and all these things. So it's getting a balance between not having too much, but then also making sure that you've got enough so that you can pay the wages and not have to make redundancies.
And it's interesting, isn't it? People sometimes who are afraid to take money out of the business and say, oh, I wonder if I have enough. Or some people who are a bit more lax, they keep taking things out of the business and not have enough for contingency.
And there's things you can do, like, you know, we have a big corporation tax bill every year, so every month we put a certain amount of our income in to save up for that bill. So that's our corporation tax bill pot, so when it comes around we can pay it. We've applied for a COVID loan like most businesses, so we've got, even though we're paying that back monthly now, we've got that in a pot somewhere, so that when we get an emergency it's there. So there's lots of ways of, you know, splitting up your pots of money like you suggested, but then looking at it monthly to make sure that you're not sitting on a pile of gold and not reinvesting back into the company.
We used to, and well, my company still does, we have in every financial, and we learned this from a financial guru who actually was the financial guru of Robert Kiyosaki.
Wow.
Nice. He was very good. Keith Cunningham, a fantastic financial mentor if you're ever looking to learn how to sell and buy companies. But he works with large organizations. He always advised them to have 4 pots. Cash can come from very many things. You could have borrowed it. So that's what we call financing cash. Okay, so even if it is the same bank account, you need to just separate them, at least on paper. Then you have investing cash, which is a cash that you got for selling one of your assets. Let's say you just sold one of your factories and you got cash. Well, don't be happy. You got that because you got rid of an asset.
Yeah.
So that's not really operating cash. The third one is operating cash. You get more cash because you make enough profit from your revenue. You can convert that profit because you collected the money, and that's now your cash flow. That's essential. If your operating cash is healthy, that means you're not living off selling your assets and you're not living off loans. And the fourth part is really what percentage do you put into a profit account, which is your dividend cash, your owner's cash.
Yep.
And if you do that, just like you have a separate pot every month for corporation tax, you should have a separate pot every month for your owner's cash. And when you see that clearly, you start seeing, like what you're saying, is monitor what's happening on every pot. If the reason we're growing in cash is because we've sold our tables, our chairs, our car, or our dog, that's kind of investing cash.
Not
you have
dog.
cash, not our dog.
Yeah,
But not your dog. But it's just that's not a healthy business, even if you've got a lot of cash. So
Yeah.
but that's good. So it's that this is all the good stuff that we and by talking about it now, we still have time.
We do, yeah.
And a lot of these things, as you said at the beginning, it might seem a bit of a strange time to be talking about this, but a lot of these sort of thoughts and feelings are actually important to consider throughout the whole year. I don't think anything that we're going to say today is something that is completely unique and specific to end of year.
But your presence here is very unique, and it's always unique every single one.
What a segue that is.
I don't know if she means
Have
that
you been
we're
slipping
weird.
at £10 notes
No,
again?
I haven't. I don't do
20%.
bribery.
Oh, wow. What pot of cash is that going into?
Oh, that's
Is that operating cash?
That goes straight into my dividend cash. Oh, well, we'll be back with more Unividual. As you can see, always a fun day when Unividual is here. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to Business Conversations, still with Unividual Chartered Financial Planners.
Did you just
Did you just whoop?
You just
Yeah.
whooped, didn't you?
Obviously, the
It's very
funnest
hot in this
patron
studio.
on Radio Bar.
Oh, the finest.
Yeah.
I
I don't know about that. I know some of the
Funnest and
patrons.
the funniest. That's great. So let me ask you a question. This is from my own experience. I work very hard to get more revenue out of my business, grow my business. But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm paying more than what I need to pay in corporate tax because I don't take enough money probably out of the business, or I don't know how to grow my business in a tax efficient way. So now that we talked about cash, as you know, when the more you have, the more you can spend. But how do we manage it so that we pay enough tax to satisfy all the legal requirements and still have some left over for us?
So,
Well,
we were both clawing at it then. Who's going to go first? So I think picking up on something that you mentioned, one of the things that, certainly if a business has a really good year that's not come out of the blue but has been better than expected, sometimes directors, shareholders can take a bigger dividend out thinking, I'm going to reward myself. And without going into all the tax consequences of it, obviously there's corporation tax associated with that and then personal tax. And what they then do when the dust has settled from a great year, they might go, right, okay, how am I going to use that money to better my personal life and better my sort of personal financial planning? And then they might put it into an investment structure or pensions or something like that. They'll still potentially benefit from tax efficiencies by doing it that way round. But actually, and part of what we can talk about is if you start a bit earlier and get the planning right, you may be able to make that contribution from your business. So that might even be
Into your pension.
a director's
from your
contribution
business.
into your pension,
'Cause
exactly.
that's what the government wants us to do.
One of the most tax efficient things you can do at the moment. Again, perfectly above board, perfectly legal. You're locking the money away for your own personal benefit, but actually getting it out of the business pretty much tax-free, no corporation tax provided you hit certain rules, and also no personal tax on it. So if you compare that versus the route of taking the money out of the business, paying all your taxes and then putting it back in, often, and there's very, very rare circumstances where that's the best way around to do it. But so there's pension contributions, but then there's also sort of investments that you can make within the business as well. So if you're not quite sure whether you should or shouldn't be taking that money out of the business, but there's surplus capital in there over and above emergency funding and operating capital that we spoke about, potentially could actually make investments as a business, which means that the profits are retained within it. You know, there's a level of liquidity there, so if you needed to access it, you could do. But also, you're not then having to pay all those personal and corporate taxes often in those environments. It can be a really good alternative solution that people, understandably, because we haven't got a huge amount of time to make these decisions, often miss them a bit, don't they?
Yeah, and the alternative is you leave it in the bank and then that goes to the profits and then you pay more corporation tax the following year. So it's...
So you've worked hard, you've paid all your team, you've paid all your suppliers, you've paid the government, and then you've paid more than what you need for corporation tax, and then you're stuck not having enough for yourself.
Yep.
That's typically what happens.
It is, and that's because people don't understand the planning techniques that you can use to make sure that you're remunerating yourself in the most tax efficient way possible, looking after yourself but still paying everything that you need to from a tax point of view.
Do you think that many business owners understand the privileges they have?
No.
Or the benefits they have as a business
No,
owner?
absolutely not. It's not something you get taught. And even when you Google it, it's a minefield of information. My brother is actually my financial advisor, and the amount I've learnt from him over the years about how I should be doing things. I absolutely would have been one of those business owners if I didn't have him, who would have been paying myself a bonus and then thinking, oh, maybe I'll put that in my pension. And it's just, it's the wrong way around to do things.
Instead of just getting your corporation to pay that into it.
So there's lots of like rules as well in around pensions that you can look at. So there's, do you want to tell them about the carry?
Yeah, so basically most
forward.
people have got a limit of about £40,000 that you can put into your pension each year, but there are certain rules where you can bring forward other previous years where you haven't used that full 40,000. So again, as Cherie-Anne said, once you get into that remit, there are some quite complex rules. And that, again, is about, we've spoken about on this, I was about to say podcast, this radio show before, about, you know, making sure you've got the right professional toolkit in place. And yes, we can maybe look at some of the more forward planning, but in order to be able to understand what you can and can't do, you also need an accountancy firm there sat alongside. And it's really about making sure that the firms are working together to make sure you get to the right solution. So it's, you know, making sure you've got the right people there.
There's a really clear benefit of having a firm to do your finances and a firm to do your accounts, because they are acting independently in the best interest of both area. Whereas if you've got a firm that's doing both, they're not independent of each other. So we are very quite clear with our clients. It would be quite easy for us to go, do you know what, let's get an in-house accountant and we will get them to do everything. But we're about teaming up with really well-known accountants in Bath or London or wherever it is the client is, and making sure that we work as a team, but that Greg has the best interests of the forward planning in mind and the accountant has the best interests of what's been happened that previous tax year.
And there will definitely be firms out there that strike that balance properly, but for us, we really like to be able to challenge accountants, and accountants likewise like to be able to challenge us. And for us, for where we're at as a business at the moment, having that ability to be able to do that out of house, so to speak, really works well for us. And we've got, as Cherie-Anne said, some cracking relationships with local and national accountancy firms, and it works really, really well, doesn't it? It removes any conflict, but also gives us the opportunity to be able to professionally challenge each other and make sure that we're actually really understanding everything and there's no...
Yeah, and it's important to get the share ownership structure correct as well from the beginning, because there can be different classes that you can create, which helps when you're remunerating in with dividends. So that's another thing that we would sit down and look at with a business owner and just make sure that that's set up properly. And if we need to get solicitors in for extra support, again, we have really good contacts that specialise in that area as well. So we look at the current situation, but also, do you aspire to potentially have staff as shareholders, a bit like that John Lewis model, and if so, how are you going to structure that, and do we need to change that now so that it's prepared for when you do that in the future?
I mean, it might be a subject that we cover off at a later point, because employee-owned trusts are becoming really popular. So the one that most households will be aware of is the John Lewis model. but there are thousands out there, and you know, we've actually been having a lot of conversations with clients recently, probably when the business is of a certain size and scale and you've got the right people in there. But once you do get to that point, it's a fantastic opportunity for there to be a form of management buyout, but management buyout from the people that are in the business. So you're not bringing external shareholders on, you're not having, you know, a big national global firm buying out the business and completely destroying the culture. So, you know, truly empathetic business owners want to make sure that the staff, when they leave the business, and it is absolutely their right to take a step back or completely leave the business, but when they do make that decision, that those 50, 60, 100,000, however many you know, staff they have, are looked after properly by each other. And provided you've got the right culture, exactly, and provided you've got all those things that go into that model to build it correctly, that can be a really good way of exiting.
But there's also some very, very complicated capital gains tax implications that staff can have that they maybe even the business owner isn't aware of, that when that then happens, they're lumped with this huge capital gains tax bill with no ability to pay for it. So again, there's a lot of complications in and around that to make sure that things are set up right for the business, but they're set up right for the employee as well, and that they're made upfront fully aware of what the capital gains tax liability is going to be.
Interesting. A good example of a great management buyout in Bath is up in Brock Street. Circus Restaurant.
Right.
When Jeffrey backed out and because he was, you know, just needed to retire, the chef, Matt, bought it, and he and his brother, now Mike, they run it. So Mike's on the business end, Matt's on the kitchen. So the other day somebody said, oh yeah, I heard the circus restaurant's been sold and I'm not sure the food quality is there. I was like, well, guess what? The chef bought it. We're good.
If not, it's going to be better, because what you find is when people become shareholders, it's their baby. And if anything, it you know, that fresh lease of life will improve the restaurant.
Especially in a very creative sector. I think sometimes people forget how creative cuisine is, and you know, having almost complete autonomy and full license to be able to do, this is now mine, I'm going to do it, you know, as you were saying, exactly how I want to be able to do it.
We've got quite a lot of food companies as clients, because John, my dad, his background is not catering, sorry, it's fruit and veg. So we have quite a lot of food clients and a bit of cake clients and things like that, so it's quite a unique industry.
It's dangerous.
It's fantastic.
We talked about the Unividual stone. As you can see, having been in nearly 8 years, I'm slightly more than a stone now. What happens is it becomes a stone, and then 2, and then you're like, oh my god, I need to lose weight, and then you drop. So that's kind of the Unividual cycle of weight.
Wow, you're truly analyzers.
Well, we've started a running club now, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm heading up a Couch 5K running club, because there's a couple of people that want to get into running, and I love running. So I was like, great, we'll do Couch 5K, and we're doing the Dragon Boat race in September that's happening, so... Yeah, we are a healthy bunch. We just like our cake samples.
Of course.
There's always cake in the office.
Of course.
I don't know why not biscuits. It is genuinely a cake obsession.
Once you've got a cake, why do you need a
cake?
Well, we've got one of John's oldest clients. He must have been working, as in when I say oldest, I mean length of time that they've been working together. And they must have been working well over 15, 16 years now. And every time she gives him a loaf of lemon drizzle
Well,
cake.
it's 2 actually.
It's now 2 because we got to that size. And
her lemon drizzle, honestly, no one can beat it. I tell you now, it's award winning. She just doesn't realise it.
I'm pretty sure she puts limoncello in it, which is why we're all a bit happier after we've had some.
She is a legend, that lady.
I just had lemon mousse for dessert also, so that was really good. Well,
if she's listening, I'll have to send her the recording to let her know that we've been complimenting her cake.
So lots of questions, listeners, just like, what are all these terms that they're saying? What more do you need to know about the rules around tax efficiency or dividends that might help you to reward yourself easier and with better peace of mind? That's why I suggest, having a sit-down diagnosis with an individual. I think you just need to ask the questions and have them give you the answers.
Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, so to even ask those questions, you need someone there to do it for you. And I think what a lot of business owners don't think about is that your business finances and your personal finances are completely intertwined. And it's actually rare in our industry to have a firm that does both business and personal financial planning. And if you can find a company that does do that, we use as the analogy, if you've got 2 trains but they're going to the same station but they need separate like lines, and they need to be running in the same direction and going to the same place with the same objectives. If not, things become disjointed and difficult to manage.
If you want to get fit, just with that cake analogy again,
Yeah.
you need a nutritionist and
You
a
do.
personal fitness for the physical training, right?
Yeah.
You can't do one without the other. Well, thank you very much for coming onto the show. I think it's a very wide topic. But it's a useful one, because I think, again, many of us just work, and we take money out. We end up overpaying everybody else and underpaying ourselves.
And
Well, thank you very much.
hopefully it's given, when we talk about those unknown unknowns, it gives people a couple of questions to ask themselves, to have a think about it. And there's a lot of, I've just put an article up actually in preparation of this interview about company end of year. So all of the stuff that we've discussed goes into even more detail in that article. So everything will be in writing, and you can actually say, okay, I'm going to try and answer some of these questions myself if you're managing your own finances.
Right. So how to keep in touch with Unividual? You can go directly to the website.
Yeah, it's
right?
unividual.co.uk.
And do you have any other social media presence?
Yeah,
like
we
LinkedIn?
do. We're on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube.
Well, great. Always a pleasure to have you guys.
Yeah, nice
Thanks,
to see you.
Cynthia.
Thank you.
And glad to see the company is growing really
Yeah, we're
quickly
doing
as
well.
well.
Yeah.
That's probably why you need all those cakes, just to
Yeah,
uh,
This is why we're still thin and beautiful, because we run
Exactly.
around
Well,
like
speak for
millions
yourself.
around.
We'll be back with more business conversations next week.
When you're ready to find out a bit more and how we can make a difference in your world, head to www.unividual.co.uk.